Every business has an ambition. PayPal Open is the platform designed to help you grow into yours. With business loans so you can expand and access to hundreds of millions of PayPal customers worldwide. And your customers can pay all the ways they want with PayPal, Venmo, Pay Later, and all major cards, so you can focus on scaling up. When it's time to get growing, there's one platform for all business. PayPal Open. Grow today at paypalopen.com. Loans subject to approval in available locations.
I thank you very much for tuning in to That Will Never Work podcast. So, do you need more rules or do you need more purpose? Today, I talked to James Robbins, and he's going to help me unpack how to build a culture that doesn't just perform, but performs at its peak. And we're going to share a story of his that because I did my research, as y'all well know, and we're going to talk about this peak that you'll see what we're talking about right after this.
Educate, empower, enable, impact. Thank you for tuning in to That Will Never Work, an award-winning podcast where we share inspiring information and personal experiences related to business and the entrepreneurial journey from those who are leaders in their respective field. Now, here's your host, author and business coach, Maurice.
I thank y'all very much for tuning in. And you keep hearing the word peak, right? Building peak performance. And this gentleman here, I listened to a presentation he had done some years ago. And he talked about how he climbed this mountain, right? And he was holding on to this tent. He was in this tent and holding on to this rock. And I'm bringing this idea up because a lot of times, we're holding on to things, right? Because we're scared of certain situations. It doesn't allow us to grow and to have faith and to, trust in our true foundation. And so, James, can you please explain that idea of holding on to that rock?
Well, the story you're referring to, we were on the side of this mountain. It's called Mount Sahama. It's the highest mountain in Bolivia. I had just signed up for this expedition, so please don't think I'm one of these professional climbers. I just where do I sign up? So anyways, I found myself at about 18,000 feet in this tent at high camp the night before we were supposed to go to the summit. And this mountain is just legendary for its high winds, and this wind was just pounding the tent. And I was just freaked out. My anxiety was at the peak, and I kept thinking we're going to blow off this mountain. And I do remember reaching underneath my sleeping bag. I was just groping the floor of the tent until I found this rock about the size of a baseball. And yeah, I just held on to that because I knew it wouldn't keep us from blowing off the mountain. But I just wanted to know, were we moving? And to try to get some comfort there. But to your point about, holding on to things. Yeah, I think it's probably the biggest thing that holds us back from reaching our potential is holding on to something that makes us feel safe in the moment. It could be a relationship, could be a job, could be an identity, something we're used to. And it's so difficult to let that go.
And because of that place of comfort, are we really able to unlock the real potential of our employees, of our customer base? Are we really able to unlock that if we're in that comfortable space?
Well, no. And when it comes to in the workplace and driving peak performance, right, in terms of creating that culture, it's more so about the environment, the weather. Think if we're going to stick with the mountain metaphor for a moment, you got to think of the culture like the weather, right? What's the weather on the mountain and what are the ideal conditions that we can create? Because the ideal conditions in a workplace, what they will do is they will stimulate intrinsic motivation or ownership. That's really, when we're talking about high performance, that's what we're after. We want people to own a piece of the company. They don't have to actually, physically own it, but we want them to own their role, own their job, and not just be, I got to do a bunch of tasks every day. And, eventually, hey, this is no fun. Let me find a new place to work. So it's really about creating the environment that brings out the best in people.
And so how do we do that, especially if we have not always seen it ourselves We didn't have always that motivator behind us, that teacher in front of us to say, hey, you can get to another level. So how do we do that inside of ourselves if we never had that experience?
There's three things if you can focus on.
Mhm.
So for anyone who's listening to this, who's a leader, you think of it in this way. Well, remember, first of all, that motivation exists on a spectrum, right?
Mhm.
I keep talking about intrinsic motivation. So that's
Mhm.
like on the far right side of the spectrum where people, they just do it because they love to do it. Well,
Mhm.
on the far left side of that spectrum would be the external motivation. This is like the
Mhm.
bears chasing you in the woods. The boss is going to yell at you if you don't get this done. You might get fired. You're going to get written up, sent to HR.
Right.
Like all these threats that happen in the workplace, are they motivating? Well,
Mhm.
they are, but it's there's a high price to that kind of motivation. So
Mhm.
what we want is we want people to tap into something within.
Mhm.
And one of the best ways to do that from all the research over the decades is people's need for progress.
Mhm.
So think of it in this way. All of us have a need to make progress. Like, Maurice, I don't know if you've ever worked a job where it was just a job. There's no
Mhm.
progress. You just had to come
Mhm.
in and put in your time. And
Right.
that's when you're clock watching. You're like, I can't wait to get out of here.
Right.
And, you start closing up the shop 30 minutes early because you just want to get out
Right.
because there's no progress for that employee. And so what we need is every employee needs a mountain to climb,
Mhm.
whatever it
Mhm.
might be, whether that's a growth goal, a KPI, an OKR, something that they feel like I can give myself to, and I'm further ahead than I was yesterday.
Mhm.
And that makes us feel good. So that's number one. They've got to be able to make progress. The second part of this has to do with the culture of the team, which we
Mhm.
would talk about psychological safety.
Mhm.
And psychological safety is that idea that I can come to the workplace and I'm not in danger, at least, psychologically. My
Mhm.
my ego is not going to be shattered here because this is a safe place. It's
Mhm.
safe to be me, it's safe to learn, safe to contribute, and even safe to challenge. I can
Mhm.
push back if it's for the good of the company.
Mhm.
And that culture, what that culture does is when people start to feel safe, then they bring more of themselves to the company. And that's how
Mhm.
they bring more ownership, right? So those two things, just even together,
Mhm.
will help create a high performance culture.
So when we take a look at what we started off with climbing this mountain, and I was really, really impressed. I'm like, yo, I want to climb a mountain one day. But my
Come on.
but my fear of heights sometimes, that kind of that's my ceiling a little bit sometimes. But
I get it.
but the reality is that there's a point that you put in there, which is something that's deeper inside of me, right? Of wanting to be able to push myself to another level. Is that something that I really want to do, or is that something that's just is it just a fantasy? But what is it that I get out of that? So what did you get out of climbing that mountain, being with your instructor, whoever it was that was encouraging you about the tent, staying there. But what was that like to have that camaraderie to climb this mountain? Because sometimes, like I stated earlier, we don't always have that. So yes, it has to start within, but we also have that external feeling. But what encouraged you to say, you know what, I'm gonna do this today, Maurice? I'm gonna climb this mountain today.
Well, what's interesting is I met the guy who ran that guiding company. His name was Wally Berg, and famous American climber. And I would stop by his house and he would tell me about the next trip they were going on, like, hey, we're going to go to Russia to climb Mount Elbrus. Why don't you come? And
Mm-hmm.
and I would always be, I'd love to, Wally. I'd love to, but I can't, I
Mm-hmm.
got kids and I can't afford that. And I can't take the time off work. And then 6 months later, I would stop by his house again and he would tell me about the adventure. And then he'd say, hey, we're going to go to Kilimanjaro. Why don't you come with us? One of the 7 summits. Oh, I'd love to, Wally. And I just kept saying the
Mm-hmm.
same things all this time. I'd love to, I'd love to, I'd love to.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one day I was driving back from his place and I thought, this is the story that you're going to keep saying. Like, there's never going to be a perfect time, but you want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just called him back. I said, okay, what's the next trip? He's like, oh, to Bolivia. And I'm like, okay, sign me up. Where do I
Okay.
give my credit card? And I couldn't even really afford it at that moment,
Mm-hmm.
but I needed to do something. So that's how that began.
Okay.
Um, it might have been more out of just wanting to do something to feel more alive. And
Mm.
often
Mhm.
that's where it starts for a lot of us. It's just that something's not lining up for us. Something's missing here.
Mhm.
And yet we're doing all the right things. Maybe we went to college, or maybe we got the job we thought we wanted to do, but then something is misaligned. And to me, that's when the soul is speaking to you, saying, "Hey, there's
Mm.
something bigger for you." And that mountain climb, it's a messy story,
Mhm.
definitely. But I learned so much out of that, and the
Mhm.
doors that opened, even that story, the doors that story opened, and how that's been able to impact so many people.
Mhm.
But I never thought that when I was in my car thinking I should call this guy back. Right? There's just we get those nudges from the soul that say,
Right.
"Hey, what you're doing is there's something bigger for you."
Mhm.
And that's where we've got to begin to stop and listen.
And it's interesting because a lot of us are on this perpetual wheel, right? We keep going in the same circle, running this same wheel all the time of saying, hey, you know what? I wish I can do. I'm going to do, but for whatever reason, we talk ourselves out of it. And sometimes we do the exact same thing with our teams, the people that's all around us. We put them on that same spin cycle. So how do we even break that, even for those individuals, along with trying to find ourselves, especially if we don't know ourselves? How do we ensure that we getting the best performance out of our team if again, we're not in that space?
A great reframe, if you're a boss or if you are a business owner, especially if you're a business owner, is to quit thinking about growing your company and scaling and what numbers. And even though those are important,
Mm-hmm.
reframe it as take your staff, take your team on an exciting adventure, an exciting
Mm.
journey where everyone's going to play a part.
Mm.
What is it that we want to do? And make that, it's going to be filled with obstacles and challenges, but in the context of the adventure, even right now, there's a lot of businesses that
Mm-hmm.
are feeling the strain with
Mm-hmm.
the uncertainty in the economy and tariffs and all of this stuff. Okay, this it's just like a scene in a movie. And so
Yeah.
how are you going to lead your people through that, but get them excited about the grand adventure of where we're going, and then help them understand what's their key role in that, so they
Mm.
can feel ownership, so then they can also make progress and feel like they're part of something bigger. You got to
Mm-hmm.
remember, most people will not start businesses, but they still have that desire to be part of something bigger, and
Right.
so they rely on the entrepreneurs like us. They
Mm-hmm.
rely on the business leaders and the business owners to create that for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a level of trust that we may or may not have in those team building exercises, and so I recall being in one session at work where the old faithful put your hands up across your chest and fall back, trusting that somebody's going to catch you, right? You know, but interesting enough, no one wanted to do that. We didn't trust each other enough, and so how do we break that idea that, hey, I don't trust you, even though I sit next to you literally every day?
Yeah, one of the ways that you can help create more trust on a team is to find affinity points between members. So, what I mean is, Maurice, you and I don't know each other
Hmm.
at all, right? And we didn't have a lot of warm up time even before we jumped into this interview.
Hmm.
So, our affinity points are very small at this point, other
Hmm.
than I know that you speak and I do speaking,
Hmm.
and we have similar industries. You have a podcast, I have a podcast.
Hmm.
So, we have some common points, so that if we were hanging out, instantly we have some stuff to talk about.
Right.
So in the workplace, that's why you want to do things like, from time to time, you'll ask people things like two truths and a lie, or what's one fun fact about you that no one here knows. And then I've seen, I've taught companies to do this, and you see
Hmm.
people come out and say, oh well, I was I'm into couponing, but no one knows. And then someone else on the team is like, I've been wanting to do that for so long, but I just never known how to start.
Hmm.
And so even though that was just this tiny moment, now somewhere later at the water cooler, a
Hmm.
conversation happens. But it's about couponing. It's not about the company, but in a sense, it's not about couponing. It's where we're taking trust deeper, because to know me is to trust me. Even if, in a sense, you don't trust me, right? Like, as you know me, then
Right.
you know how I'm going to be. But the more similarity we find with someone, that we can see ourselves in them, that's where we really begin to trust people.
Well, James, sometimes I'm an introvert, right? Maybe I don't want people to get that close to me, because I'm fearful that people are going to use it against me. Because in this society, unfortunately, is me first, right? And not worried about the person next to me, bringing them along with me through this journey, that we can really help each other through this process. So how do I recreate that me first mentality?
Are you, just so I can understand the
Mhm.
question, are you talking about from a business leader with their team perspective, or if it's just me building trust with my team?
It could be either way, because because it kind of almost, again, the key is me, right? Either
Yeah,
way,
for sure.
so however which way you would like to take it.
Well, if you're a leader,
Mm-hmm.
one of the best things you can do is take a genuine interest in those that you lead. And when I say genuine interest,
Mm-hmm.
to know something about them, like their spouse's name, how many kids they have,
Mm-hmm.
what's a major hobby and passion they have outside of work. Well, why would I want to know these things? So that from time to time I can just be interested. Because when we care about someone, that's a source of trust,
Mm-hmm.
right? When someone feels like my boss cares about me, that means he or she is less likely to stab me in the back, steal credit, pull the rug out from under me. And hopefully
Mm-hmm.
they don't.
Yeah.
And so one of the challenges for us as leaders is we're so busy, we got to get things done. And so we
Mm-hmm.
can roll up on Monday morning, open up our Slack channel and just be like, hey, hey, I didn't see the Instagram post. Hey, we can
Mm-hmm.
start asking those business questions, but hold on a second. Just take a moment and be like, hey, everybody, what'd you do on the weekend? What was the best thing you did on the weekend? And people are going to share, oh, fantastic. Hey, have you gotten back into biking yet? I know you wanted to do that. Right. So it's these little moments that
Mm-hmm.
don't take time, but they add dimension and depth to the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And the more people can feel like, oh, I'm more than a number here,
Mm.
then they'll trust a bit more, and then they bring more of themselves to the workplace.
So there's a key word that I believe you started off with by saying leader, right? Because sometimes we don't really know what that word really means, to be honest. And sometimes breaking down those barriers as a leader, that's our responsibility, to bring comfortability, trust, reliability in that situation. And so how would you define the word leader for those of us that may not know?
That's the $1 million question, Maurice. How did someone define leadership? I'm going to tell you how I don't define it. It's definitely not just this position,
Mm-hmm.
right? At the end of the day, leadership is when you are thinking outside of yourself to
Mm-hmm.
make something happen, typically for the greater good, or at least
Mm-hmm.
typically to see to reach some kind of a goal. But when I say thinking outside of ourselves, is if I'm only thinking about me,
Mm-hmm.
I can go build a solo company and I can go and do that. But when I need help, all right, now this person has come in. I have to now think, how can I help them be the best version of them?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's going to help them and it's going to help me. And so it's not an either or, it's a both and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what leaders do. Leaders really, great leaders, I should say this.
Mm-hmm.
Great leaders elevate people. They elevate people's performance. Great leaders make people believe in themselves more, accomplish things they didn't think they can do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always easy,
Oh
right?
no.
Leadership isn't easy, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be complicated.
Um, it doesn't have to be. Sometimes we overcomplicate because we're overanalyzing,
For sure.
right? We're overcomplicating because, again, we're looking at what the perception is that one supervisor, and I'll speak about my own experience, when I had a supervisor who stated, hey, Maurice, in order for you to be where I am, you need to duplicate exactly what I do, which was not always the most pleasant. And understanding that everybody hates you. You get what I mean? And so sometimes that's why I had stated earlier, sometimes our examples, are not always the best examples, especially if we don't have it. But they got up there because of the perception was they did their business, they did their job, not realizing they were demoralizing everybody underneath of them.
Yeah, you make two great points there. The first one relates with all of us come to leadership pretty much through the same door, right? We were good at what we were doing and we were trustworthy and there was a need and someone said, hey, I need you to be a manager. And all said, whoa, there we were. But at that point, we then look to, oh, I need to know how to lead people. And our only Rolodex is the bosses or coaches we've had in our past. Now, maybe you were lucky and you had great bosses, or maybe you weren't lucky, but that's all you have, right, to go by.
Right.
And so early on, that's why leaders have to really begin to be aggressive at how do I grow my leadership skills, because that's so important. And then the other thing, you can be a leader and burn out your staff. You can do all these things and maybe get the job done, but are you an efficient leader? You're more of an expensive leader. Like you led this company, but the cost was all these people quit. Let's talk about how much that cost.
Right.
And so often we don't factor that into the formula, right? If we think, okay, here's this guy, and let's say he was a leader, and then he made these mistakes, and the company had to pay this fine, and he's cost the company this money, $1 million. Well, meanwhile, he's actually cost them $3 million because of all these people that quit and the bad work they brought forward, which then lost them contracts, all because of the culture that he created.
Yeah.
So, but we don't evaluate leaders based on that bottom line because that one's hard to measure.
Wow. I mean, and I remember just as you're speaking, I could see the conversation that he and I had, and as you stated, that turnover, because our department was a lot of turnover every year. And I was in customer service. I'm talking about very early on in my corporate America life, I guess. And we were in customer service, and we had people there that were genuinely there. They really wanted to help people. So, but the work didn't have to be that hard. He didn't have to over coach us. He didn't have to over direct us. We were running pretty well, but sometimes, hey, we want to get to these stats and things like that. But if we just would have pulled back some, we could have overachieved, to be honest. We were a team of 13. We could have overachieved, but because he was so hard on us, we kept underachieving. We kept missing our stats. And so sometimes we don't see the value in that. We're pushing so hard at a certain number that we don't know how to relax a little bit and breathe.
Yeah. If people don't have a chance to, as you said, like relax and breathe, even have some fun, then productivity actually gets stifled. Because, it's interesting. I interviewed a guy who ran a funeral home, and I said to him, his name was Michael Pearson. And my first question was, is it any fun to work here? And his answer was, fun here is critical. And he said it very seriously, but he said, we have so much stress and the heaviness of what we do. He said, when the clients are not there, he said, if we're not able to have some fun together, blow off that steam, he said, man, we can't do our job. And it comes back to your point, right? Because we're not robots.
Right.
And maybe if we were, then leading would be a lot easier. But the complexity we bring is because also goes to the beauty that we bring.
Right.
And so you can't view your staff just as economic units, or you will, you can, but you're only going to get like 70% out of them. Wouldn't you rather have 90?
And that's where we were. We had our line was 92. Right. We had to get 92% on our call, correctness, time, all that type of stuff. But we kept hovering around 79 or 80 because it was just too much. It was just too much pressure on us. But when those times when he did let down a little bit, we was at 93 to 95, and so sometimes that's what I mean by, in my own experience, if we were able to breathe and not being hovered over, and also knew that, hey, every call was being monitored. We knew the calls were being monitored. That's just part of the job. But not constantly being reminded of that, that put a lot of pressure on us in that situation.
And that comes back to the thing I said at the beginning about psychological safety. When I said safe to fail, safe to learn, safe to contribute, right? When people understand that, yeah, okay, I'm being recorded, but the reason I'm being recorded is to help me be better.
Right.
And that we can look at that and be like, here's what you did great. And, here, how do you think you can improve? When it's not so evaluative, because as soon as we put that judgment in, right? And I've heard you talk about that before, about judgment, how we don't like judgment. It's not good for us. We put the walls up. And, if, let's say I could go back in time to your boss of the team of 13. And if I said to your boss, hey, how would you feel if I gave you one more employee and you didn't have to pay for them and they're already trained, would you want them? Well, the answer would be, of course. Where's this person? Well, I just need to get 13 people to be 8% more engaged. And there's your extra employee.
Right.
And so you start thinking in that perspective. It's like, oh my goodness, 8% is not much, right? To get someone to lean in that little bit more. To your point, sometimes that means it's backing off. But really what we're backing off, right? The pressure, we're backing off the psychological unsafety, because now people are like, okay, now I can bring my full attention to this moment, and I'm not scared. Because if you're working scared, you're just working with part of your brain.
And there's one thing that the manager would love to hear. It didn't cost them a salary or a fringe benefits or anything else.
100%.
But James, I appreciate you coming on. Please let everyone know where they can find your information so they can understand how they bring their business, their employees to a peak performance level.
Sure, Maurice. Well, you can easily find me online, jamesrobbins.com. That's 2 B's, jamesrobbins.com. And I'm on LinkedIn, posting there all the time. Come say hi. Let me know that you heard me here on Maurice's show.
Sure, no problem. And James, again, I have a question for you that I ask everybody. And because of this team building, I might have another question, but we're going to start with this first one. Would you rather, now think outside the box, would you rather choose 3 doors or a fork in the road?
Would I rather choose 3 doors or a fork in the road? Oh, 3 doors, because the fork in the road seems a lot of pressure.
Now, if you use your imagination, what's going on with the 3 doors? Could you see through them? Are they already open? Or are you just like, hey, it's 3 doors, I'm just going to pick them?
They're closed, but I got more options.
Really? Now, I told you, again, when I'm talking about this team building thing about having fun, right? So let me ask you this question, James. If you could sing a duet with anyone in the world, dead or alive, who would it be?
Bono from U2.
Really?
Yeah.
That was hands down quick.
For sure.
That's nice. That's nice. Now, would you actually be singing with him, or would he be singing and you're just kind of playing the background?
Yeah, maybe I'm just on stage watching and taking selfies or something. But I should probably have a better answer than Bono. That's just my favorite band. But
no, that's fine.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. No, but I appreciate it because, again, you stated about having fun, right? And bonding with the team. It's those type of questions that understand, hey, how you operate, how you think, how you maneuver through this life. A lot of times we don't do that. And those are great icebreakers.
Absolutely. I love that. I'm going to steal those. I'm going to steal those questions.
Nice. But I thank you, James, for coming on to the show today.
Maurice, thanks for having me.
Sure, no problem. And of course, everyone, his information will be in the show notes. So if you're walking, running, jogging, whatever it is, climbing the mountain, swimming underneath the sea, you'll be able to get to it later on. Thank y'all very much for tuning in today, and I'll talk to you just a little bit later.
Thanks for listening. Follow Maurice Chism on social media to stay connected and check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, that will never work. Or will it?
Every business has an ambition. PayPal Open is the platform designed to help you grow into yours. With business loans so you can expand and access to hundreds of millions of PayPal customers worldwide. And your customers can pay all the ways they want with PayPal, Venmo, Pay Later, and all major cards, so you can focus on scaling up. When it's time to get growing, there's one platform for all business. PayPal Open. Grow today at paypalopen.com. Loans subject to approval in available locations.